I never meant for things to go as far as they did, but looking back I can see that I was already in deep. I wasn't even sure why I did it. It just felt fun at the time, like a game. Something to break up the monotony of my life. The party started off just like any other, with a drink in my hand, mingling with familiar faces, the kind of crowd I had grown comfortable with over the years, the usual group of friends, people I'd known for years, people I hadn't seen in a while, some strangers mixed in. My husband, Jason, was there too. He was always a bit more reserved at these kinds of things, but he liked to come with me. He was always supportive, sitting quietly while I talked to everyone else. Jason had always been a great husband. He was kind, dependable, and for the most part, predictable. Maybe that's where the problem started. He was too predictable, and I wanted something different. I wanted attention. I wanted the thrill, and I knew exactly where to get it. It started with small gestures. I wasn't even thinking about it at first, just the usual flirting. Light, playful stuff. You know the kind of thing you do when you want to feel wanted without meaning anything by it. I'd catch a guy's eye, give him a smile, let the conversation linger a little too long. Nothing too overt, but enough to feel the electricity in the air. I think I enjoyed the attention more than I let myself admit. But as the night wore on, I started pushing the boundaries. One guy, then another. And then Jason caught me. He was standing by the bar when I turned to look over at him. I saw the way his eyes were narrowed, the way he was studying me. For a moment, I felt guilty. But then I remembered how much I loved the feeling of being desired, and that guilt just slipped away. I wasn't even sure why I did it. Maybe it was just to see what I could get away with. Maybe I wanted to remind myself that I still had it. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Not really. Jason and I had been married for 5 years, and while our relationship was solid, there was something missing, the spark, the excitement. And in those moments when I was talking to these guys, I could feel it again. The next guy was Mark. I'd known him for a while, but tonight, there was something different about the way he was looking at me. He came up behind me as I was talking to someone else, and I could feel his breath on my neck. The tension between us was palpable. He made a joke, and I laughed, leaning in a little closer than necessary. I knew what I was doing, but it didn't stop me. I was enjoying it too much. Jason was still watching. I saw him glance at us, his face unreadable. I don't know what was going through his mind, but I didn't care. Not at that moment. By the time I found myself talking to another guy, Ben, this time I was feeling more emboldened. My laughter was louder, my touches more deliberate. I wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It was like I was testing a theory. How far could I go before it would start to matter? I glanced over at Jason again. His expression had changed. He wasn't angry yet, not exactly, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. He knew something was going on, and maybe, in the back of my mind, I wanted him to know. I wanted him to react. I didn't stop. I kept playing the game. Each new guy I spoke to, I felt a little bolder. The attention from each of them fed something inside me, something I hadn't realized was starving for more. Jason was still there, in the background, but it was like he was becoming less and less of a presence in my world. And then there was another shift. This time, it wasn't even flirting anymore. It was something deeper. The moment I kissed Mark on the cheek as we were talking, I could see Jason's reaction from across the room. He stood there for a beat, just staring at me, and I could feel the walls crumbling. I knew he had seen enough, but in the moment I didn't care. The thought of him being upset didn't make me stop. If anything, it pushed me further. By the time the night came to a close, I felt a rush I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a heady mix of power, desire, and guilt, but at the time, the guilt didn't even matter. I was high on the feeling of being wanted by other people, of stepping out of my usual role as the good wife, the dependable one. Jason and I left the party around the same time. We didn't speak much on the drive home, and when we walked inside, I could feel the tension in the air. I had done something, and I knew it, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to say. I was expecting him to say something, anything, but instead he just went to bed, and I let him. I didn't even know what I had done wrong, but somehow, I knew that night was the beginning of something else, something I couldn't take back. The days after the party were awkward, to say the least. I tried to act like everything was normal, like I hadn't just crossed a line I didn't even know was there. Jason was distant, but not in an obvious way. It wasn't like he was yelling at me, or even giving me the silent treatment, but I could tell something was off. Every time we had a conversation, it was like we were speaking different languages. I'd say something, and he'd nod, but it felt like there was a wall between us that hadn't been there before. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe he just needed some time to process the night. Maybe he was just feeling hurt or confused, and he would get over it. So, I carried on with my usual routine, hoping that the distance would fade. I still found myself thinking about the attention I had gotten at the party. How every flirtatious comment, every laugh, made me feel like I was alive again. But every time I thought about it, I also thought about Jason. I thought about how I had hurt him. But I pushed those thoughts away. After all, I hadn't really done anything wrong, right? I hadn't slept with anyone. I hadn't crossed any physical lines. But the more I tried to justify it, the more I realized that the emotional distance between Jason and me had already grown. It was in the small moments, really. The way he wouldn't look at me the same way anymore. The way he'd pull away when I reached out to hold his hand. We still shared a bed, but even that felt like a chore. The intimacy that had once been there was gone. And I could feel it, deep down, that it wasn't just about the party anymore. It was about something bigger, something I had been ignoring for too long. I knew I had to do something. But what? How do you fix something when you're not even sure what the problem is? One afternoon, about a week after the party, I tried to talk to him. We were sitting in the living room, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I asked him what was going on, if something was wrong. He looked at me for a long time, almost like he was deciding whether or not to tell me what he was really feeling. Finally he spoke, and his voice was so quiet, I almost didn't hear him. "You know what you did," he said. I didn't say anything. I just waited for him to continue, but he didn't. Instead, he stood up and walked into the kitchen, leaving me sitting there, feeling like I was sinking. His words echoed in my mind. "You know what you did." I didn't know what to say to him. I was trying to process it myself, trying to figure out what exactly had happened. It wasn't just that I'd flirted, or that I had enjoyed the attention from other guys. It was that something inside me had changed. I felt empty. Like the attention I was seeking from others wasn't enough to fill the void I was feeling in my own marriage. I'd convinced myself I was just having fun, that it was harmless. But it wasn't. It wasn't harmless at all. The next few days were a blur. Jason wasn't cold or angry, he was just quiet. And that silence was unbearable. It made me feel like everything I had been pretending to ignore was suddenly glaringly obvious. I thought back to all the moments I'd taken for granted. The times Jason had done something thoughtful for me, the way he had always been there when I needed him. And I thought about how I'd ignored that. How I'd let it slip away in favor of, what? A few moments of attention at a party. One evening, about a week after the party, I decided to confront him. It was stupid, really, because I was already too aware that the damage had been done, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know what was in his head. We sat down in the living room, both of us avoiding eye contact for a while. I finally broke the silence. "Jason, I need to know what's going on. Are we okay?" He looked at me, his eyes tired, like he'd been holding something back for too long. "I don't know, Anna. I don't think we are." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had hoped for something more, some sign that maybe I could fix it, that maybe I could make it right. But it wasn't that simple. "I never meant to hurt you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't think it would affect you like this." Jason shook his head. "It's not about that. It's about trust. It's about respect. I'm not mad, Anna. I'm just disappointed, and I don't know if I can get past this." I could feel the tears starting to rise in my throat. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to look weak. But hearing him say those words, disappointed, it was like a knife twisting in my chest. I didn't think it was a big deal. I admitted, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. I thought it was just flirting, just harmless fun. But it wasn't. It wasn't harmless. I was trying to feel something. I was trying to feel like I mattered, I guess. like I still had it. Jason looked at me, but I couldn't tell what he was thinking. There was something in his eyes, something tired and resigned. He didn't say anything for a long while, and when he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. Anna, I don't know if I can be with someone who needs to feel validated by others. It's not enough that I love you. You need more than that. And I can't give you more than I already do. It felt like the ground had just opened up beneath me. I tried to explain myself, tried to tell him that I didn't mean to push him away, but it didn't matter. It was already too late. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. I don't know if we'll ever be the same. But in that moment, I realized how much I had lost, and it was terrifying. After that night, things between Jason and me were never the same. We still lived under the same roof, still went through the motions, but I could feel the tension in every room we occupied. There was no escaping it. The weight of what I'd done was pressing down on me, heavy and relentless. I tried to tell myself it was just a bump in the road, that we could get through it, but deep down, I knew things were broken beyond repair. Jason had withdrawn completely. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't warm either. He became this person I didn't recognize. He would talk to me, sure, but it felt like we were having conversations with walls in between us. The affection was gone. The little gestures we used to share, the hugs, the kisses before bed, those had faded into nothing. He would walk right past me without so much as a glance, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. I kept hoping, praying that he'd snap out of it, that he'd come back to me the way he used to be. But every day that passed, I saw him slipping further away. It wasn't just that I had flirted with those guys at the party. It was the fact that I had betrayed him. I had gone searching for validation from others instead of looking inward, or worse, looking to him. And now, there was this wall between us that I couldn't break through. I didn't know how. I'd made mistakes before, but nothing like this. The way I had toyed with those other men, the way I had practically paraded around, knowing Jason was watching but not caring, that felt like a betrayal on a level I couldn't even explain. And then there was the guilt that came rushing in after every confrontation, every quiet moment in our house. I hated myself for it. I hated that I had made him feel unimportant, like his love and attention were just not enough. I remember one night, about 2 weeks after the party, I was sitting on the couch, staring at my phone. Jason was in the kitchen, and we hadn't exchanged a single word since I got home from work. There had been no, "How was your day?" or "Did you sleep well?" There was just a silence. I was so desperate to talk to him, to fix this, but I didn't know how. What could I say that wouldn't just make everything worse? I typed a message to one of the guys I had flirted with at the party, Ben, I think, and I stared at the text for a long time before hitting send. The text was nothing scandalous, just a stupid comment about how nice it had been to talk to him that night. But as I pressed send, I felt a wave of disgust. Why was I still doing this? Why was I seeking validation from others when I knew that the one person I should have been focused on was standing right there, in the next room? I deleted the message. Jason walked into the living room then, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he looked directly at me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held this quiet, resigned sadness that seemed to pierce right through me. I wanted to say something, to explain myself, to apologize properly, but I knew it was pointless. The damage had been done. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason didn't sit down. He just looked at me, and for a moment, I thought he might leave the room. But instead, he nodded and took a seat across from me, his body language closed off. "I know you've been hurt," I started, trying to find the right words. "And I know I messed up. I hurt you. I don't know why I did it. I don't know what I was thinking, but He interrupted me, and it wasn't in a harsh way. It was almost like he had already accepted everything that had happened and was just trying to move forward, even if it meant moving away from me. "I don't think you know, Anna," he said quietly. "You're right. You don't know why you did it. And that's the problem." His words hit me like a slap in the face. I hadn't realized it before, but now it was so clear. The problem wasn't just that I'd flirted with other men. It was that I hadn't taken the time to reflect on what I was really searching for. Why was I looking for attention from people who didn't matter, when the only person who should have mattered, the only one who loved me enough to stick by my side, was right in front of me. I don't know how to fix this. Jason, I whispered. I don't know what to do. His eyes softened, just for a second, and I could see that he still cared, but it wasn't the same care that had been there before. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Anna, he said, his voice breaking just slightly. You say you're sorry, but it feels like you don't really understand the hurt you caused. And I'm not sure I can keep living in a relationship where I'm constantly questioning whether or not you're going to do it again. His words cut deep. The idea that I had pushed him to a point where he felt like he couldn't trust me anymore. It made me feel sick. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a betrayal of the kind that left scars, and I could see that Jason was carrying those scars now. I'm sorry, I repeated, but this time it felt hollow. Sorry wasn't enough to fix this. Sorry wasn't going to make everything better. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us feeling the weight of everything that had been said, everything that hadn't been said. And then Jason stood up, walked out of the room, and that was when I knew. I knew that things were never going to go back to the way they were. The next morning, Jason was gone. His things weren't packed up, but I knew he wasn't coming back. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything at all. And I was left there, alone with the wreckage of my own mistakes. It's hard to describe the emptiness that followed when Jason walked out. It wasn't just about being alone in the house. It was about the weight of what I had done sinking in. I had always thought that the worst thing about betrayal was the heartbreak it caused the other person. But it wasn't. It was the guilt, the self-loathing, and the realization that I had destroyed something I would never get back. I stayed in the house for a few days, just staring at the walls, barely moving. My mind kept replaying the night of the party, each moment flashing before me like a slow, motion nightmare. The way I'd laughed too hard at the guys' jokes, the way I'd touched their arms a little too often. I remembered the way Jason had looked at me from across the room, and I could feel the heat of his gaze, the hurt in his eyes, even now. I hadn't cared then, but now it was all I could think about. I kept thinking, why did I do it? Was I looking for validation because I felt like I had lost something inside myself? Was I bored with my life? Or was it simply because, for a moment, I felt wanted, like I mattered again? It wasn't that I didn't love Jason. He had always been there for me, always supported me. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling invisible. I started feeling like I wasn't enough, and that feeling pushed me into making stupid decisions. The guilt gnawed at me constantly. I wanted to reach out to him, to apologize again, to tell him how much I regretted everything. But I knew that even if I did, it wouldn't fix anything. What could I possibly say? Could I convince him that I was sorry enough to make it right? Could he ever look at me the way he did before? The thought of him seeing me the same way again felt impossible. I wasn't even sure if I deserved to be forgiven. I had betrayed his trust in the most public, humiliating way. Not only had I flirted with other men, but I had done it right in front of him, making him feel small, insignificant. How could I undo that? How could I undo the way I made him feel like he wasn't enough? Like he wasn't even the most important person in my life anymore. The first few days without him were a blur. I cried a lot. I went through the motions of living, but everything felt like it had lost its meaning. I had taken everything good in my life for granted. Jason was always there. He didn't deserve this, but I didn't know how to fix it. And the truth was, I didn't even know if he wanted me to fix it. He was the one who had left. He was the one who had made the choice to walk away. But even with the silence hanging between us, there was a part of me that refused to let go. I kept thinking that if I gave it enough time, if I worked on myself and proved to him that I was capable of change, maybe he would come back. Maybe he would forgive me. But I also knew that I was fooling myself. There was no guarantee of that. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to face the reality that maybe Jason would never come back. Maybe he would never look at me the same way again. I didn't hear from him for a while. I left messages, but they went unanswered. I tried to make sense of everything, but I was too lost in my own shame to figure it out. The house felt empty, not just because of his absence, but because I had built this life around someone else's love. around someone else's approval, and now that it was gone, I was left with nothing. And I couldn't even blame him. I had done this to myself. A few weeks passed before I saw him again. I had been walking through the grocery store, not really paying attention to anything, when I turned a corner and saw him standing there by the produce aisle. For a moment, my heart stopped. I wanted to run to him, to apologize again, to make it all better, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching him. He was different too. He didn't look angry, but he didn't look happy either. He just looked tired. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him how much I regretted everything, how much I was sorry, but I didn't want to make things worse. So, I just stood there, staring at him, and then finally, he spoke. "I'm not mad at you, Anna," he said softly. "I'm just hurt, and I don't know if I can trust you again, not after what you did." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to say that I was sorry, that I would do anything to prove I could change, but instead I just nodded. I knew it wouldn't matter. I had already broken something beyond repair. The trust, the love, it was gone. "I understand," I said, my voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me." Jason didn't say anything for a moment. He just stood there, looking at me. Then he nodded slowly, as if he had accepted something that had been weighing on him for a long time. "I think we need some time apart," he said, his voice calm but final. "I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were. I don't know if that's possible. But I need space to think, to figure out what I want." And with that, he turned and walked away. I didn't follow him. I couldn't. I knew that, at that moment, he was making a decision I couldn't change. The silence between us was deafening. And as I stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, I realized that I had lost him. There's nothing more painful than realizing that you've hurt someone you love, that you've pushed them away in search of something that was never really worth it. And now, as I sit here, alone in my apartment, I have nothing but the echo of my own mistakes to keep me company. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if Jason and I will ever reconcile. But I do know this: I've learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, the things we think we want the most aren't worth the cost, and some mistakes, no matter how much we regret them, can't be undone.